Hey everybody, what's going on? Hellmite here, bringing you another video from Grab the Lantern today. It's Tuesday, and the patch notes for patch 7.9, aka the mid-season patch, have finally been posted, so it's time for another patch note rundown. As always, I'll be going through the biggest changes in the patch, as well as things you might want to look out for in your games in the following couple of weeks. Now, this is the mid-season patch, so I'm going to say it right now. This will likely be a longer video than normal, and there's a lot that I won't be able to cover in depth just because there was so much changed. So I highly suggest you look at the patch notes if you are interested for details on these changes, as I will be going pretty top level over all these stuff and give you just a general idea about what's happening. Anyways, let's go ahead and get right into it with our reworks. We have a couple of reworks in this patch, Maokai, Sejuani, and Zac. The three Vanguard champions. This mid-season is intended to be more of a tank meta change patch, I guess. Similar to how the Assassin patch was, but a lot lower scope. So let's go ahead and take a look at our first rework, which is Maokai. Maokai was really too good at everything. If he was good, he was always picked, but if he was bad, he never got picked. And he was a generalist. You could pretty much pick him in every single team comp, and it just didn't matter. So the idea behind the rework was to give him places where he's good and places where he's bad. So first, his passive was updated. It now operates on a cooldown, but whenever he's struck by a spell, or whenever he casts a spell, the cooldown is massively reduced. The healing was also pretty substantially buffed, so I do expect to see Maokai being very, very good against especially spell spammy champions like Cassiopeia and Karthus, who are constantly damaging him with spells, because he'll keep getting the heal back, and the heal is pretty massive, so it should be pretty significant for Maokai in fights. Next up, his saplings on his E now do additional damage if they're thrown into a bush, and they will do that damage over time. So another thing to keep in mind while you're laning as Maokai or jungling as Maokai, as I think jungle Maokai is now a little bit better because of the E buff. And finally, he has a brand new ultimate. Instead of just granting himself 20% DR and doing some random ambient damage, now Maokai summons a giant wall of roots that travels in target direction. Each will root and damage the first enemy champion struck. Now these roots are all individual, unlike Nami Wall, so even if Yasuo Windwall's one, he won't Windwall the rest of them, thank God. And the root duration increases based on how far they travel. Now they travel about the length of a lane, but they move very, very slowly, especially at the beginning. This gives Maokai opportunities to set up fights, but he needs to find creative angles to flank, or he needs to cast the roots on as like a follow-up to an initial initiation after someone like a Maokai or maybe a Brombo combo. Malphite is what I meant to say. Malphite initiation. Obviously, the Maokai is not initiating. Anyways. Moving on, talking about Sejuani. Sejuani, the biggest problem with her was that her ultimate was her kit. It was a very, very strong ability, and the rest of her kit suffered because she just didn't have the power budget left for it. The ult was all she could have. So Riot have nerfed her ult, understandably, but given her back power in the rest of her kit. And I think her changes actually make her look like she might be very, very good, but we'll go ahead and break them down now. Her new passive essentially gives her massively increased resistances and immunity to slows for a few seconds after she enters combat, scaling with her champion level. So by level 16, these bonuses will last for 3 seconds, which is pretty significant. In addition, if she attacks, her first attack against an enemy that she stunned will deal massively increased damage based on their attack, based on their maximum health, which is crucial for the next part of her kit I want to talk about. Not the next kit, but anyways. Her W is now a 2-hit combo. She'll swing her flail in a cone in front of her, and then strike out with it in a line in front of her. This will knock back minions, and it kind of behaves similar to Rengar Q if you played with him. And each of these will add a stack of frost. Her E, Permafrost, now has a few different changes. Her auto attacks, her W, and nearby melee ally auto attacks all apply frost stacks to enemy champions. Sejuani can activate her E on an enemy that has 4 frost stacks to point and click stun them and deal magic damage. This is pretty significant, and it can only be stacked by melee allies. Your ally AD carry will not be able to stack it at all. Finally, her ultimate now will only stun the first target hit, and if the bola travels at least 400 units, it will create a giant ice storm around it as well that will slow enemies and detonate after a few seconds to damage them further. So Sejuani will have a little bit more point-and-click crowd control. She synergizes a lot better with other melee champions. And I think in general, though, her damage will still be very, very good, especially with the ability to stop a Callista, let's say, in her tracks. So we'll see how that plays out. Finally, we have Zac. Zac had really, really great initiation potential with elastic slingshot, but once he ended up in a fight, he didn't really do much. So Riot have decided to give him a few more interesting choices to make once he's actually in a fight, and decided to play up his goo theme a little bit more. Zack's passive, W, and E were 100% untouched. However, his Q and his ultimate were changed fairly significantly. His Q is now a skill shot. You fire out your limb and damage and slow the first enemy struck. In addition, Zack will leash to them. His blob will continue to stick to them for a slightly longer duration. If Zack then auto-attacks a separate enemy champion or target, he'll slam both targets together to deal magic damage. Which gives him a little bit more crowd control in lane. Additionally, if he sticks to a target and then attacks the same target, he'll just reapply the same slow. He won't slam the target into the target or rip them apart or anything. Finally, his ultimate has been changed. Instead of bouncing around, he depresses onto the ground. If he channels for less than a second when he lets go of the button, he'll just knock up and do a bunch of damage to nearby enemies. However, if you continue to hold down the button for at least a second, Zack will grab enemies that are standing on top of him and carry them in a target direction. He's unstoppable while doing this. To give Zack a little bit more team utility. I'm not quite sure how it's going to play out, but I think it'll be interesting to play with at the very least. Next up, moving into items. We have 2 new items being introduced for tanks. First is Gargoyle Stoneplate, grants magic resistance and armor. And the idea behind Gargoyle Stoneplate is it grants you bonus resistances while surrounded by 3 or more enemy champions. And when you activate it, it grants you a massive amount of bonus resistances and health, and this is incredibly increased if you're near a lot of enemy champions. This is to give tanks a little bit a way to thrive a little bit longer in fights without. When you activate the ability, you deal 60% reduced damage. So it's a way for tanks to survive a little bit longer in fights without having them deal too significant amounts of damage. Though Cho'Gath and his true damage ultimate may break the item. We'll find out. Next up, Adaptive Helm. It grants magic resistance and reduces damage taken from the last spell you took. So if you're getting spammed on by the same spell over and over again, Cassiopeia, I'm looking at you, each successive cast of E will deal less damage. So it's a good way to itemize against these kind of champions that want to sit and spam the same spell at you over and over again. Defensive items were also largely adjusted. I'm not going to break them all down because there was a lot of changes, but generally they'll grant less health than they did before, but more resistances than they did before, and their unique passives were generally played up a little bit more than they were before, so you can look forward to that in this patch. Lifesteal items were generally buffed, except Blade of the Rune King, which has gotten nerfed a little bit. Crit items were generally buffed as well, and all the Zeal upgrades were equalized somewhat to make them a little bit more appealing. Runaan's is doing less single target damage, but the bolts are doing more. Rapid Fire Cannon now charges energized attacks slightly faster, and Static Shiv now does more damage on the lightning and gives you, I believe it lets you get crits faster, something along those lines. Anyways, there are changes, you can take a look at them. Armor penetration items have generally lost armor penetration because tanks really can't afford to be taking too much more damage because they all lost health on their itemization, so we'll find out how that works. And finally, a couple of AP items were swapped around. Banshee's Veil now has the same recipe as Abyssal Scepter, and Abyssal Scepter now has the same recipe as Banshee's Veil, but they kept the passives. Banshee's Veil is now an early survival item for mid lane mages because it grants the spell shield, and Abyssal Scepter is now more of a tank item that helps you deal more damage and your casters to deal more damage to the enemy team. Finally, Guardian Angel now grants attack damage, builds out of a BF sword and a chain vest, and has the revive passive, but it's generally gold inefficient unless you take into account the passive, so it's a way to make it a little bit more of an attractive item on AD carries, the people who are supposed to be building it, and not so much on tanks, which are too hard to kill to merit them buying Guardian Angel. Finally, we want to talk about support itemization was changed a little bit here. Now all support items have quests. Completing these quests by earning gold with their unique passives will grant you some kind of benefit. For Ancient Coin has actually been changed substantially. Now, whenever a minion dies, it has a chance to drop a coin, either a gold coin or a mana coin, whichever you didn't have last. And picking up the coin grants you, surprise, gold or mana. If you make enough gold doing this, you complete the quest and get a skill elixir, which when consumed will grant you an automatic skill point. Basically means you'll end up leveling your abilities at level 17 as opposed to level 18. Could be interesting, we'll see how that plays out. Relic Shield, the quest is completed by executing enough minions with it, and when you finish the quest, you get an out-of-combat shield that regenerates whenever you execute minions. Finally, Spell Thief's Edge grants you, the quest is completed by getting gold with the Tribute passive, and when you complete the quest, further Tribute passes will grant you a bonus to your movement speed for a few seconds when you proc it. So, a little bit of a way to get in, do some damage, and get out. And finally, let's talk about Rift Herald. Rift Herald has been changed fairly significantly because for a while she just wasn't earning her keep up in the top lane, and now she actually has a reason for existing. The encounter has been changed. Rift Herald will charge the first enemy that tries to kill her and deal a lot of damage, and when she hits certain health thresholds, she'll deal damage to enemies in a cone in front of her. Besides that, the encounter is mostly the same. However, when you kill her, she drops an item that someone will pick up and will be added to their inventory. They have this for 4 minutes, and as long as they hold on to it, they have an Baron Empowered Recall. When they use the item, they'll channel for a couple of seconds and summon the Rift Herald back to the Rift. And she will walk down lanes, killing minions and trying to take down towers. Now, when she first gets to a tower, she'll charge at it and deal a bunch of bonus damage based on her maximum HP, or based on her current HP, but will also deal a lot of damage to herself at the same time. Her damage is also entirely dependent on her current health. If she is low on HP, she will be dealing hardly any damage, and she can be affected by enemy crowd control effects, so she can be stunned, slowed, suppressed, all that good stuff. So it gives teams a little bit better of a way to siege, and makes Rift Herald a little bit better of an objective to trade for a Drake. If they're going Drake and you can't contest, maybe go for Rift Herald and try to take more towers with her. But we'll see how she plays out in-game. There are also a lot of bug fixes and tweaks to things. And the biggest change, though, I do want to leave you guys off on, Graves got his cigar back. Praise be to Bard. We finally have it return. This is the most exciting part of preseason, ladies and gentlemen. Anyways, that is the entirety of midseason. There's a lot more changes. If you want numbers, please go read the patch notes. I was not able to cover everything here, and I urge you do so, as that will be live tomorrow. If you enjoyed the video today, go ahead and leave a like. If you really enjoy the video, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and on patch days like today as well. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it, and I will talk to you all later.